Welcome to season 15 of the Parenting Aces podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Stone, and this week we are talking to a golf coach about college tennis. Coach Mikkel Bjerk-Andresen has done a big data scrape of college tennis rosters and has uncovered some unsettling information, unsettling numbers that he shared in an article. And I'll have the link to that article in the show notes on ParentingAces.com. But in today's episode, Mikkel and I kind of dig into that data scrape and its implications for junior tennis players and junior tennis families here in the US. So I hope you keep an open mind as you listen to this conversation. Listen all the way to the end. It is not all dire. There is hope. So hang on and don't get all freaked out. And keep an open mind as you're listening to the information that he shares. Numbers don't lie, and he's got the numbers to back up everything that we talk about today. So again, I encourage you to go check out the article itself and Mikkel's Substack. Both links will be in the show notes. But for now, sit back, relax, and enjoy my conversation with golf coach Mikkel Bjerk-Andresen, coming at you from Oslo, Norway. Mikkel, welcome to the podcast. It is a pleasure to meet you. And I think it is so interesting that a golf coach decided to do a deep dive into college tennis. So maybe you can give us a little bit of the backstory around this article that you've written that inspired this podcast episode.
Sure. Thanks for having me, first and foremost. Yeah, I guess I'm just a curious person with sometimes too much time on my hands. Although most of the time it doesn't feel that way with two small kids and all the interests I have. But basically, I have a past as a college golf coach, where I spent 7 years at three Division I schools, and then live now in Norway, but my mind always, wanders over to college golf still. And so I basically started this project where I wanted to map out a lot of rosters and a lot of roster data going back in time, because really, and this might be a bit of a sidestep, but where my interest really started was I read a book by David Epstein last fall, like towards the end of the year. I actually read a couple books of his, and I started reading about how people's bodies and sort of the selection of athletes have gotten evolved over time. And so, like, for example, he wrote about an example in water polo where athletes' forearms have actually gotten longer over time, which is selection. It's like athletes with longer forearms perform better in water polo because they can get more torque and leverage and so on and so forth. And so my nerdy brain went to, okay, I wonder what heights on golf rosters look like. So that's really where this all started. And so I designed and wrote a couple scripts to scrape online golf roster data from college, and ended up with like 250,000 rows in a large sheet and so on and so forth. And so after nerding out about that for a long time, I then decided I wanted to have a comp to my golf data. And the most natural for me was tennis. It's an individual sport like golf, played in a team setting. Selection and recruiting is somewhat similar. It's pretty global. So that's where I diverted into them. But I couldn't serve it over the net right now if I had to. And I don't know that much about tennis, so I'm not going to try to brag myself into some competence I don't have.
I appreciate that. And I want to dig into this data that you scraped and analyzed, because while I don't like painting a bleak picture for tennis families or about college tennis, both of which I love very deeply, the data is pretty bleak. And I think it's important for families to know what they're getting into and not have things sugar coated or go into this with rose colored glasses, because the reality is the reality. There's nothing we can do about it. The numbers don't lie.
Right. So, I mean, the overarching story here is that over the last 20 years, which is the period I decided to scrape and sort of organize, um, American participation in men's and women's D1 tennis has decreased dramatically. And so what I've looked at is where the players are from. And so I have some coverage of from data. And then I sort of look at that up against the NCAA participation number reports. And so in 20 years, rough numbers here in tennis, the American participation report of those D1 roster spots have gone from about 70% down to 40% in tennis. And so,
okay, wait, stop.
Yep.
From 70% American recruits to 40% American recruits in 20
Correct.
years.
20
That's
years.
A huge decrease, statistically and otherwise.
Yes, it is massive. And I expected this change to, emerge from the data, but not at that magnitude, going from 70 to 40%. And so NCAA participation overall, so like overall amount of roster spots have remained fairly stable for tennis. Some programs have been added, some have been discontinued, and so on and so forth. But you've seen a slight increase over the 20-year period in overall D1 spots. But a lot fewer are being awarded to American-born players per the roster data that I have been scraping. And I think I have about 73,000 player year combos in my database for tennis. So it's pretty vast data set. And I don't have 100% coverage, obviously, but I have a roughly 65% or more in this 20-year period. So we can insinuate pretty safely that it is a very dramatic change in this 20-year window.
What was so eye-opening to me was the fact that you didn't look at just the top programs, which we know have started heavily recruiting internationally, because let's face it, tennis is a global sport and there is talent out there around the world. But you looked at a wide range of D1 programs, and that includes mid-majors. It includes programs that maybe the majority of people haven't ever even heard of that are Division I, and even those programs that aren't highly funded, that don't win national championships, even those programs are going outside the US to recruit. And that wasn't traditionally the case.
Correct. And, to sidestep into golf again, my domain, here's where D1 golf and D1 tennis differs a bit per now. So on the golf side, I expected, especially Power 5, Power 4 conferences, whatever you want to call them now, to see a large global change there, which I did see on the golf side, but then not as much on the mid-major level. But tennis is has a large change on the mid-major level as well. So it's not just the Power 4 conferences in tennis. It is all conferences, and that's what's really impacting the total amount of D1 roster spots being awarded to Americans in tennis. So rough numbers on the golf side, the movement has been about 80% to 65%. And then tennis is about 70 to 40% in the same time frame here.
It's just so depressing to think about. And you think about all the time and money that these athletes and their families invest in developing to a point where they are, quote, good enough to be recruited to play at the collegiate level, to think that the roster spots in Division I are less and much less available to these athletes is really sad. And it makes what I do a bit more challenging, not a bit, a lot more challenging, because for the majority of my online community and my in-person community, college tennis is the goal for these kids and these families. If Division I is less and less and less available to them, that leaves Division II, Division III, NAIA, junior college, which are all fabulous options. But if you're looking at junior tennis development as something with an ROI in terms of monetary value, eek.
Yeah. No, I think, and I'm obviously, and maybe sidestepping here a bit too, my original quest with this was to see if there had been height changes in golf, really, which I actually did find statistically significant too, at the Power 5 level, that athletes have gotten taller, and against the backdrop of population in general, there's been an actual statistically significant shift. But most of that was composition effect, meaning the coaches are selecting players from countries which are taller. So I say all that to say my perspective on this with tennis, when it comes to, how many roster spots are available to Americans, is I'm a Norwegian myself, so I went through the golf side and actually impacted these numbers. So I'm a 6'5" Norwegian who played college golf. So I kind of have a different, or I'm one of these people fighting for these roster spots in the data. And what I can say just from my own experience from the golf side, both as a recruit and what I see in the golf community here, and then also as, my experience is 7 years as a Division I coach. And I was at a couple of Power 5 schools in Texas Tech and Baylor. We were highly ranked. So I got a lot of recruiting outreach. And what I can say, which I suspect is one of the main drivers in tennis, would be just the global awareness now, and the increase in demand from tennis juniors all across the globe wanting to come to America. Because 20 years ago, people across the globe probably knew about college tennis, but it has probably grown, and so the demand for these spots is like incredible, and it's from all corners across the globe. It is from right outside my window here, where there are tennis players, and it's Asia, it's New Zealand, where your son is living. It is everywhere, and everyone is fighting for those spots. And so I think that's what you're seeing, is the global awareness and so many people wanting these limited amount of spots.
And what's interesting is now we're seeing former college players having success, real success at the professional level, which I think has also contributed to the growth in demand from the global community for these spots, right? They're now seeing college tennis in the US as a viable pathway to a successful professional career, which wasn't the case necessarily. I mean, we had, the McEnroes went to college, the Bryan brothers went to college. On the women's side, we really didn't see players going to college because they were having success at the professional level at a much younger age than the men. But now we're seeing some really successful former collegiate players on the pro tour. I think that's a good thing. And I think it's causing some problems for American juniors.
Yeah. And I don't know tennis as well as golf again, but I know that you can peak a bit earlier in tennis than in golf. And I think that plays into this. And I think you are right. Proof of the pro path is probably causing a lot of increase in demand from Eastern Europe, for example, for tennis and so on and so forth. But I also think the other thing that is playing into this over a 20-year period is just the incentive for coaches. I don't know the exact data on the tennis side, and I don't have exact data on golf side either. I just have my own experience, and that is that college golf is a lot more important now to athletic departments, to donors, to people supporting the athletic programs. And so coaches are paid more. They're on shorter contracts with more pressure. And, coaches respond to incentives. And most coaches who take these jobs at D1 schools are competitive. They are probably been good players themselves. They're connected in the tennis community. And they're going to turn over every stone they can to get the best players on their roster quickly so that they can perform. They want the best teams. And when they see this influx in demand and their mailbox being populated by, and I'm probably going to say the wrong terminology here, but, a player from Serbia with a great serve, or, a player from Chile who has an amazing backhand or whatever, they're going to be inclined to take that player who's going to outperform the local player. And I don't blame them at all. That's what they have to do in order for their team to perform. And I think it's a really good thing that sports such as golf and tennis are, getting a higher stature within athletic departments. And then
I'm not sure tennis really falls into that, sadly.
Okay. Well,
golf,
I for one used to go to the matches where I was at, especially at Baylor. They were very popular. Tech had a couple of really good teams, but of course, we're a lot lower in the pecking order than the footballs and basketballs and baseballs.
Right.
But I think if you look at the coaches' contracts and the serious level of those jobs, they've definitely tailored a lot more over these 20 years than what they used to be. And I think you see some reflection on that in the ways that they elect to fill their rosters.
I think another piece of this, and I don't know if you've looked at this yet, but the nationality of the recruiting coaches, has that changed significantly in this same time period? And the reason I'm bringing that up is I know when my son was going through college recruiting, and this has been a while ago now, he was recruiting at one program that had an American coach who they were in pretty serious conversations. That coach got recruited by a bigger program and left. The new coach was from South America, and from the get-go was very upfront with my son and said, look, I don't have a spot for you. I'm bringing kids in from my home country. I've got a network there, and I've got a network of coaches that are feeding players to me, recruiters down there that are feeding players to me. There's not going to be a spot for you. So I don't know if that's common. I can also say from, again, my son's experience, the second school he played at, they recruited very heavily from Australia and New Zealand. They had a pipeline. It was American coaches, but they had found success with players from these two countries and recruited heavily from them. So it's not necessarily that a non-American coach is going to impact this, but where are these pipelines and what's happened over the last 20 years that those pipelines have really developed such that they have a huge influence and impact over the rosters? Have you looked at that at all? And I don't know if golf's similar.
I know so many on the golf side, and again, I'm a product of this whole, change. I was a 2011 high school recruit out of Norway, a 2015 graduate of Baylor, and in 2016 I started coaching at SFA, 2017 Texas Tech. So I think you probably have more college coaches. This is just my hunch, but with the increase in students being globalized, that trickles into coaching because coaches are usually former players, either from that school or somewhere else. So just the sheer, group of ex-players, a larger share of those are international. And then some people find their way to stay in the States to either play professionally or they meet somebody or whatever. They start as graduate assistants. So I would think that's very plausible. And of course, again, it's about the coaches' incentives. Their incentives are, through their contract, and then also like what they want to accomplish. They want to compete. And almost every school in the D1, their expectation when they hire a new coach is to be among the best teams in their conference. And so, of course, as a coach, you're going to use whatever advantages you have and whatever insight you have and whatever trust you have to recruit the absolute best players that you think will fit within your culture. So for me, yes, I recruited Norway and Sweden heavily. I recruited Ludwig Aberg to Texas Tech, for example, who's now obviously doing great. And we had other Swedes and Norwegians, but we also had other people from other parts of the country. But, I can only speak to that as a coach that a lot of recruiting is obviously about finding great players. But at a certain point, it's not necessarily so much about evaluation. I don't know about tennis, but I assume if you watch major junior tournaments, everybody can figure out the guy who won that tournament is probably a really good player. So then it becomes about, obviously the product that you have as a school, the total package. But a lot about this is about building trust and knowing that the next step for that player will be developmental. So circling back to, your intro here, that the pro path is now proven on the tennis side. If you're a coach who has had great success with Australians, it is easier both for you to recruit another Australian, but it's easier for that Australian that you're recruiting to have trust in you and sort of see that the path forward to the pro path. So it's sort of it goes deeper and deeper, both from the coach side and sort of the unique recruiting bed that you have and the pipeline that you're growing.
One of the things you write about in this article is the impact on a fan base for a particular school's team, and how in this era of lots of cuts coming to non-revenue sports and at the college level, it's easy to cut a team that has a very small or non-existent fan base. It's more difficult for a school to develop a fan base when their whole roster is international, as opposed to at least having a significant part of the roster be locally recognizable names and faces. You've got the parents of the players. If they're international, the parents aren't flying over to the States every other minute to come watch their kid play. You've got the people who watch those kids come up through juniors. If they're international, again, who's that's coming to the mat? I mean, so you're really seeing fallout in so many different aspects from the fact that the number of Americans on these rosters is shrinking. You say it's kind of stabilized at this point, it seems, but even still, to look at a roster and have it be only 40% American, that doesn't bode well for the future fan bases of these teams.
Yeah, I see your point. I think it's a valid point. I think, the hometown hero or the homegrown talent obviously bodes well. And I think that is very important to some schools to have a mix of that. But I think also both tennis and golf need to, I'm not trying to problemize the international recruiting, but I think you need to really think about who's what's your local connection, and you need to really take care of that as, an athletic department and whatnot, and as a community. But I also think that you need to, both golf and tennis, the real problem with the revenue sharing deal and where we're at with the totem pole, referring back to what we spoke about earlier, is we do need fan engagement. We do need donors caring about our sports, because we need to protect our sports and have them grow into the future. And I think some of that is you need to have a certain amount of local talent. If that stabilizes around 40%, I don't know. But I think what is misaligned sometimes is if that's a goal for the athletic department, or if this trend keeps continuing, the coaches' incentives aren't aligned with that, because the coaches, their job is to produce a winning roster. And usually their contracts are designed that way. They need to renew it after 3 years. They get a bonus if they do well. They start at a mid-major. They want advancement in their career. So their incentives is to get the best players on the roster. And I think that's what you're seeing a result of. So what the solution is and what the happy medium is, I don't know, but we need engagement, and we need fan bases around both tennis and golf programs.
Well, I think what's important to recognize with all of this is that, as you said, coaches are hired to win. I mean, that's the bottom line. They're going to recruit to win, because that's how they keep their job. If they have a larger pool of American talent to draw from, maybe they're going to utilize that at a higher level. I mean, I've done multiple podcasts talking about why American players aren't getting recruited as much as international players. And there's so many pieces of this. But one underlying piece that each individual player can improve for him or herself is to work harder and get better, so that you can compete against and win against your competition around the world. Coaches want to win. One thing I find very interesting is there's been a proliferation of summer tennis camps, spring break tennis camps, winter break tennis camps on college campuses, because that's a great revenue stream for these programs. They have to supplement their budgets. These non-revenue sports aren't getting a ton of money from their athletic departments. So one would think that if a child goes to these college camps and starts to develop relationships with the players on the team and the coaches, that would open doors when it's time for recruiting. Sometimes it does, but even with that, the coaches are going elsewhere to recruit. So there are a lot of moving parts to all of this, Mikkel. And from where I sit, the simple answer is the American players have to get better. Easier said than done. Easy for me to say. But also, is it a bad thing that there are 40% Americans on these teams and 60% from everywhere else in the world? From the parents' side of this, now looking back on my son's experience, thank God there are so many international players. My son is living his best life as a result of having a teammate from another part of the world. And now my son is living down in New Zealand. So that wouldn't have been an option for him. It wouldn't have even occurred to him, I don't think, had he not had that experience of living and training and playing with these guys from all parts of the world.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that either. But I agree with you. The short answer is get better, because the globalization is here and everybody wants to play college tennis. Coaches want to win, and that's what you're seeing the effect of. And I think coaches have more pressure than they did 20 years ago, and they might have larger contracts, but shorter and maybe more pressure. But But yeah, that's the short answer. And then the bigger question is what I can't answer, and that's a really good question, is what proportion of sort of the hometown hero is appropriate and healthy and good for the school, the athletic department as a whole, the donor base, the long-term vision, because there is an inflection point there somewhere, and I'm not sure if we passed it. We might have at certain schools for sure, but I don't know that fact. And like you said, there's probably other good effects from the globalization as well, but I don't think necessarily all the American resources that's put into tennis is being left in college tennis. Obviously, there's a lot of scholarship money being spent on global talent, both in golf and tennis. So what the inflection point is hard for me to say, but I think you're seeing the result of how good players are from across the globe, how much they want to go to college now because they see it as a career path to get an education and a potential pro path, and then how much coaches want to win, basically. And I think golf will continue a little bit further now that I see how far tennis has gone, especially at the mid-major level. But I'm very curious as well to see sort of what the ending point of stabilization will be in both sports.
And I think it's important for families to understand the implications of this for their own children that want to play college tennis. So as I said early on, I used to tell people, you've got to widen that funnel. There are some amazing Division I programs outside the Power 4, Power 5 schools. But now not even those mid-major programs are necessarily recruiting American students, or not as many American students. So now what? Now where do we look? Well, there are these other divisions. Division II also has scholarship money, but Division II, and I know you haven't done the data scrape yet, but maybe you will, they also, in tennis at least, are heavily international rosters, much more so than Division I was. I'm not sure if they've now kind of equalized. That would be interesting to see. But Division III, where there is no athletic scholarship money available, still does have skew heavily toward American players. And so I think for families looking at college tennis as a viable path for their children, Division III is becoming way more attractive if your child actually wants a roster spot and a spot in the top 6 so they get to play. Junior college is a great option as well. NAIA is also a great option. We've done podcasts on all of these different divisions and what they look like. So I encourage families. I don't want to leave you guys with this doom and gloom kind of feeling after listening to this. I want you to understand there's still some amazing college tennis playing opportunities out there. And you may just have to dig a little deeper than you would have 10 or 20 years ago.
Yeah, I agree with
that.
that.
Is that the same in golf, Mikkel? I mean,
yes, I have done the scraping in golf, so I'll do it in tennis for you and let you know, and maybe publish something about it on D2 and the other levels. What I have seen in golf is exactly what you're saying. D2 is somewhere in between D1 and D3 as far as international percentage. D3 is the lowest. Off the top of my head, I think it's about 8%. D3 in golf at least has no athletic scholarships. And so
not tennis either.
Yeah, they're usually very academic institutions. And so what we see there is the internationalization is less European, more like Asian, and Canada is a very high percentage there, which makes sense, proximity and the academic side of those schools. So, and that has remained fairly stable, but then you've seen a shift in D2 that's somewhere between D1 and D3, basically. I've also done some NAI searches, but I'll dig deeper into the other stats for you, but I believe it. And again, I think it's just because of the awareness from tennis players all across the globe. They want to come to the U.S. college system because what you guys have is very unique. So I understand all the parents listening here who have tennis juniors wanting this for their son or daughter. The college athletics experience is amazing, and it's sort of a bubble in life that is so unique. So yeah, I just think the demand is very tough, and that either get a lot better, get your serve better, or whatever you do in tennis. In golf, you just need to shoot lower scores, or you need to widen your search a little bit, and I think look for opportunities where you can have playing time, connect great with the coach, because I think relationships are, the foundation of any experience, and then see where you can get the total package where you'd be happy with your education and all that. And but yeah, there are tons and tons of opportunities if you're willing to sort of open your eyes a little bit.
What are your feelings on the NCAA's role and the sport national governing body's role in limiting the number of international scholarships or international roster spots? Do you think that's appropriate?
I don't. I think it is up to the athletic departments to really look at, what they want sort of their overall mix to be. But I don't think it should be governed from the top down. I think that would be wrong. That would rob a lot of, uh, capable players and good people who want a good education for the right reasons, and would sort of rob them of that opportunity. And if a coach wants to go all international and has good students, good people on their team, it does their job, represents their university in the right way, I don't think that should be a top-down legislation of limiting that. But I do think, through the points in this podcast, that there is a conversation to be had about, what sort of percentage, or how can we also make sure we get the hometown hero. And I don't know exactly what, discussions or whatever you should have, but I see that as a great asset to any tennis and golf team. But each school has a different recruiting dynamic. In golf, there's very different things from school to school, even though they're just down the street from each other. One might be a very academic institution, one might not. And so the academic institution can attract a lot more local, for example, whereas the state school might need to go more international. And so I think it's up to each school to decide, but I don't see that necessarily changing too much either, if that makes any sense, because what the schools want is to win. And they're going to hire coaches who want to win, and then you have the incentives that we see the results of.
Right. And from the junior developmental coaches' perspective, you guys need to understand what's going on too, and stop telling every single kid and parent that comes into your program that you're going to develop them for a D1 roster spot. Those spots aren't widely available, or as widely available as they used to be. And you need to work within the reality that we're living in, which is D2, D3, and AIA junior college may be much more accessible to more families than these D1 roster spots. And I've talked about this before, and Mikkel, I don't know if it's the same in golf, but it's really a shame that the NCAA decided to name the divisions numerically, because there's this inherent, in my opinion, misunderstanding that Division I is better than Division II, better than Division III. And that's not necessarily the case. There are top performing programs at every level of college tennis, at least, where there are teams in Division III, NAIA, even junior college teams that can beat Division I teams. So let's stop talking about it in terms of a hierarchy and let's look at the whole picture.
For sure. And I consult a bit and help a few families here and there from Norway as well with the recruiting on the golf side. And that is one of the most common things ever that I hear is, how about this school? Oh, no, they're ranked, whatever. And it's easy to see yourself blind on which division and what the team is ranked. Just through my experience as both a college coach and then a golf coach here at home. Development is a lot about relationships and in the right way. So you need to be challenged in the right way, but you also need to connect with your coach and your teammates in a really good way. You can go to the best place ever where there's sun and beaches and everything's free and you drive fast cars and everything's perfect. But if you have constant conflict with your coach, for example, or you don't see eye to eye, development will be very hard and that will be a bad experience. But there are so many good spots out there, good coaches that are in it for the right reasons who want to recruit you somewhere where you'll get a great experience. So, and I agree a bit with you, but on the development into Division I coaches, and I don't think necessarily this is a great way to raise a child, but just as an anecdote, I have two small sons myself, and Norway, soccer is like very big here. And we actually have a good soccer team right now, some big international stars. One of those international stars is the captain of Arsenal, who is leading the Premier League now and doing really well and stuff. And I remember seeing an interview with his dad, and he raised Martin. Martin Ødegaard is his name. He's the captain of Arsenal now. But when he raised Martin, his thought every day when he came home from work was, has Martin got enough touches on the ball today? And what he envisioned was kids in Spain or kids in Brazil playing soccer all day, having all these touches. And he tried to sort of do mental math on how many touches they had. And he went out with Martin and they got tons and tons of touches in every day. So, and I don't think that leads to a happy, upbringing for maybe the kid, and definitely not the dad being anxious about how many touches, a Serbian or Norwegian or Australian tennis player is getting today. But that's maybe the reality that needs to set in then, is that there's thousands of tennis players out there hitting backhands right now. And your hour at the academy, the tennis academy with a coach, is as good as somebody's doing across the globe. And there's 1,000 of them right now who wants that same college spot.
Right. And it's not, for tennis, it's not necessarily the number of hours or the number, well, it is the number of touches, but it's the quality of the touches as well, and the quality of the coaching that you're getting. And, we've done so many podcasts on how to choose the right coach and what does high performance look like and all of that. But I think getting back to kind of the positive message to end this with, because I want to end with a positive, is that there are still so many amazing college coaches out there, college tennis programs out there that would prefer to recruit an American player if they can, if that American player is at a level that's going to help them win, fits in with their team culture, as you talked about, Mikkel, and is looking for the right things out of their college tennis experience. So I'll say it again, when it's time for college recruiting, you've got to cast a wide net, a wide funnel. As you get through the process, it can narrow down, but don't write off that junior college. Don't write off that Division III school. Take a look at them, go visit, talk to the players on the team, get a sense of what it's all about, because that may be your best opportunity to play tennis at the next level. And I'm going to keep my fingers crossed that these numbers that you've uncovered, Mikkel, are now at a stabilizing point, and we're not going to change much over the next 20 years unless it goes back in favor of more Americans on rosters. But I honestly, I don't see that happening. I think tennis is becoming more and more and more global, not less. So, I think these numbers are here to stay. They're our reality. So let's do our best to work within that reality so that more American children have the opportunity to see their name on these college tennis rosters.
I think that's a very good point. And, maybe to hammer down what I said earlier, my experience of being a coach, the number one thing I consult these families that reach out about golf is it's about the relationship. And so don't write anybody off. I totally agree with that. What's right for you might not be right for somebody else. Just because it's a brand name might not be the right person at the helm of the program or the other players to push you in the right way and create safety for your child in the right way for them to develop and get the full experience. And I guess my final note to round off on a positive note is college sports is truly like a dream. It's a very unique setup in the States, and everybody should be really proud of, you guys having college tennis, us having college golf as golfers, and really hone around that and be great fans of the sport and the experience these athletes are getting because I have so many countless teammates and players that I've had on rosters that will stay with me forever just because of the college golf experience. So it is really unique, and I understand that American parents want these spots for their kids, and global parents want these spots for their kids. But like you said, there are a lot of great options out there that's not necessarily just the brand name, but the right people around your kid when they go to college.
I love it. Mikkel, thank you so much for taking time to, first of all, to do the data scrape and to put this all together for us. It's very eye-opening. And again, I will have a link to Mikkel's article in the show notes on parentingaces.com. And if you end up looking at the other divisions and publishing something, I hope you'll send it my way and I'll share that out as well.
I appreciate that. You can, for those really nerdy out there, I write mostly about golf, but I do have a Substack. So if I do anything further on tennis, which you might have motivated me to, I will publish it on my Substack, which is Mikkel Golf. So you'll find it there.
Awesome. And we'll have that link in the show notes as well. Thank
Sure.
you again. And to my audience, thank you so much for tuning in. We'll catch you next time on Parenting Aces.